Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news updates. Always a pleasure and a privilege for us to join together. Always thankful for every one of you who share and encourage others to join us for these news updates. They have grown. We have more people sitting with us for these, so we're grateful for all of you that are stopping by and joining us for these. And again, it's a labor of love. Thank a member of Remnant House. If you find these reports, these updates edifying and encouraging, thank Yahuwah. Thank a member of Remnant House. And we certainly would appreciate if you stop on by at remnanthouse.org and let us know how much you do appreciate that. We certainly are thankful for the support from all of those of you who stand with us. It is what makes the difference. Amen and amen. So grateful for all of you that are here with us tonight. And for those of you that are new, we do have a website. We do these weekly, and we have a website at remnantwatch.com. That's remnantwatch.com. Go ahead and bookmark that. And by the way, guys, I thought there already was a search bar. For whatever reasons, I thought it was already there. And then I went looking and I noticed that there wasn't there. So I put that search bar here, right here in the middle, very easy for you to search any stories or topics that you find interesting or perhaps missed in previous updates, and you can get those articles to pop back up. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. And again, I apologize for that not being there before. I didn't realize that. And when I noticed that was missing, I said, hey, let's get that fixed. So we did. And anyway, that website is a labor of love. You'll find no ads or pop-ups on there. Can't vouch for the links, but at least at remnantwatch.com, you're going to find that we're conscientious of that and try not to bombard you while you are trying to review, and gives you an ability to review the headlines. I'm one of those people that tends to scan, and if something grabs me, then I'll dig a little bit deeper. So a lot of these articles are the articles that caught my attention, and that's why we want to talk about that. So thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for those of you that are sharing the links with others in places that we don't even go. So, wow, you guys are awesome. That's really awesome. And so thank you for that. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight, the lead story that we're talking about is, of course, the Middle East. We watch this area because, of course, it is the area of the scripture that we know many of these events will unfold. And the Middle East is, of course, continuing down this pathway of major loss of life and major conflict. Again, all prophesied and expected. Nevertheless, difficult to watch. I think all of us can agree it's not easy to watch these things unfold. And a ballistic missile was fired by Yemen's Houthis. It hit Israel, sparking a fire. And this is a hypersonic missile. So a long-range ballistic missile fired from Yemen. So that's a long ways away, and it hit central Israel, sparking fire, according to the Israeli military. The missile triggered air raid sirens in Tel Aviv and across central Israel, including the Ben-Gurion International Airport, sending residents running for shelter. There were no reports of casualties or damage, and the airport authority said normal operations resumed shortly after. But nevertheless, what they just demonstrated is that you're within range. That's really the message that is being conveyed. I think we can all kind of see that one pretty clearly. You are within range. You can be hit. You are not out of range, and we can hit you from here. That's a dangerous thing. And, of course, you can expect that Israel will respond. If there's one thing that they are known for is their military responses. And I'm sure Israel is going to militarily respond. So again, we continue to ask the question here on this broadcast, if somebody can tell us the value or the benefit of these things. If I still can't figure out what the upside of a bomb is, but okay, here we go, right? And how's this playing out in his local area? We know, the economy's down 20% in Israel. We also know that it's been a mass exodus, right? Makes sense. I mean, it's a dangerous neighborhood, so there's a lot of people leaving. And then on top of that, if they can get out, so, the airport is busy. Let's just put it that way. And that didn't help, right? And on top of that, here's what's going on at home, okay? Opposed to Netanyahu, 2/3 of Israelis want to negotiate with Hamas. So the on the ground reporting is a little different than you might hear in the mainstream media. The recent general strike in Israel is not just a demonstration against the rhetoric that we shouldn't negotiate with terrorists and that the IDF will release the hostages held in Gaza. It marks the beginning of a realization that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is not defending Jews. While Jewish Israelis are not yet aware of the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, they are becoming aware of the anti-Arab pogroms in the West Bank. Gradually, they are beginning to admit that their enemies are not their neighbors, but are among them. They are the revisionists, and you can see that name right there. And so this is becoming very interesting as the people in Israel begin to notice some things that maybe you all knew, right? That there might be snakes in the weeds. And again, we don't say all the people, we just know that within people are hidden bad factors. In fact, we take note that 60,000 people in El Salvador were arrested, right? In that crime sweep. You guys remember that? They took 60,000 people off the street, gang members and what have you. And there was a little bit of an outcry for civil rights and so forth. And there's valid reason for such outcries. But nevertheless, interesting results occurred. Something like 98% of violent crime and like murder, robberies, and a host of crimes literally plummeted. And it became the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, as I understand it. So what did that reflect? What did that say? You know what that says? That says that if you were prejudiced against El Salvadorians, you would have been wrong 99%. There's 8 million of them. 99% of the time, you'd have been wrong. That all that crime was being done by a small percentage of the people. It tells you something. Sometimes hidden within a population is a strong criminal element doing some criminal things. But the vast majority of the people may be completely innocent and, frankly, naive to what's even going on around them. They're literally being used as human shields. And I think Israel's starting to wake up to realize that. So that's kind of interesting. Something we're going to watch with interest, right, guys? I mean, that's an area, like, as we're watching sort of the shifting, the way the minds are working and the awakening that's occurring, you can't stop it. You can't stop the awakening. So you got all of these things where it's coming, it's coming out in every sector. Light is coming from everywhere. This is going to be an interesting time. Speaking of interesting, something unprecedented, Palestine sits as state for the first time, unprecedented. We love to watch unprecedented things, right? We keep an eye on things that are for the first time, right? So anything we see like that, first time, unprecedented, never happened before, we pay attention to those things, right? And Palestine sits as a state for first time at 79th session of the UN General Assembly. So you can see the direction they're going here. Palestine will be able to include its representatives in the list of speakers at meetings at Middle East issues, propose amendments, and make procedural proposals on behalf of a group of countries. And so this is interesting. And again, it will culminate as high-level week on September 24th through the 30th. So a very pivotal time. We are, of course, talking about the Kadosh weeks and the time periods of the Kadosh feast. So this is very interesting that this is happening at this time, during which heads of state and government and foreign ministers from around the world will present their vision. Notice this? See this? Present their vision. So they have a vision. Yahuwah has a vision. They have a vision. We have division. You can only have one vision. One of these visions will not survive, just so you know. They have a vision of the international situation and outline ways to address global challenges. The Russian delegation will be headed by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and the presence of the representatives of Palestine, which have been given a seat in the General Assembly Hall next to the UN member states, can be considered a historic moment. So this is a moment for us to take note. I do take note that we are literally 7 years from the sign of the woman in the heavens. If you all remember, there was a celestial sign that occurred in 2017 in this very time period. And I do believe that there are certain things that are lining up for this fall being, well, an interesting time. Okay, so we need to be aware that that is a reality in this time period. We have, we've reached a new place. We've reached a place where we're going to see certain things that we may not have expected to see. Now, one of the things that has recently happened, and we watched this develop. Now, we talked about this, guys, and we all saw this. We began to wonder, why would they be opening up this fight in northern Israel when they had their hands full in Gaza, right? And as we saw coming, we saw this, right? Next thing you know, they were shifting away their focus away from Gaza, which is slowly happening. I mean, after all, they reduced it to rubble. And now they're shifting their attention to the north. So the IDF ordered to prepare for a military campaign in Lebanon, and they basically are essentially declaring war on Lebanon. Situation in north cannot continue. We must return residents home. More than 11 months into the war, Netanyahu chairs a discussion about the situation in the north and decides it can no longer continue. Israeli officials believe the American diplomatic effort is futile and war is a matter of time. And so basically Netanyahu's words at the cabinet meeting Thursday night, on more than 11 months of Hezbollah joined Hamas in attacking Israel, was said even before Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets into Israel over the weekend. On Shabbat night, the IDF attacked Hezbollah's ammunition depots, both in southern Lebanon and in the north, more than 150 kilometers from Israel's borders. So they're not even very far away. 150 kilometers is not very far. Okay? And they are engaging. So you can expect that this area is going to continue to essentially escalate. I do believe you're finding the heart of the warmongering. There's a lot of development of the East in its strength. So this is countering a lot of what we saw manifesting in the West for 5 decades. So we watched a global hegemony and a global single currency rule the world. A global single currency was ruling the world. And now it is coming down, which is also part of the prophecy of Revelation. And Putin orders Russian army to become second largest after China's at 1.5 million strong. So they're really increasing their military strength. President Vladimir Putin on Monday ordered the regular size of the Russian army to be increased by 180,000 troops to have 1.5 million active servicemen in a move that would make it the second largest in the world after China's. So this is where Russia has an advantage. They have a large fighting force, and they are, again, measuring their responses at Ukraine. And now it looks like they are about to take this to the next level. And again, this is what we were saying about this fall and going into this winter. It portends a difficult time period. There's a lot of coincidental things that we're noticing that are coming together at the same time period. We have the elections in America, for those of you that are paying attention to those things. But this is the kind of stuff that I'm paying attention to when you have a lame duck. If you have a loss, if the right picks up the office, so what mess might they inherit, right? World at war. Russia gave Iran nuclear bomb secrets in return for missiles to strike Ukraine, West fears. And so they're concerned. This is now being floated as justification. Once again, guys, you know how there's always a race to the high ground. Russia handed Iran critical nuclear secrets. We don't know that. We have no way of knowing that. But they're claiming that, right? So is this another head fake? Is this another weapons of mass destruction? I don't know. But that's what they're telling us, right? Russia handed Iran critical nuclear secrets in return for ballistic missiles to blitz Ukraine, the West fears. I don't know who the West is. Who are they quoting here? See how they do this? This is manipulation. The Doomsday Deal was discussed at crunch talks between Joe Biden and Sir Keir Starmer on Friday at the White House. The Sun on Sunday can reveal. Putin, and again, it's just a declaration. There's no evidence for this. There's no, I mean, again, maybe there is some evidence for it, but the point is the way they're stating it, the way they state certain things, you can tell that they're insulting the intelligence of the people that they're manipulating. Like, they're not even going through the process of taking you through it and bringing you to their conclusion. No, they're just concluding it, and you're supposed to just understand that this is who we say the bad guy is, and therefore this is the bad guy. Okay. This kind of rhetoric just leads to war, folks. So if you're an anthropologist, if you're a historian, if you've paid attention to history and the things that precede major conflict, well, this is the kind of rhetoric that you typically see. And here you're seeing, again, the counter rhetoric, right, coming out of Reuters. Russia says it could combine with China if they face the threat. This came out on what date? September 11th. That's kind of interesting, right? So Russia said on Wednesday that its partnership with China was not aimed against third countries, but the two powers could combine potential if faced with a threat from the United States. And of course, they continue to say this. This is not a nice thing to keep hearing. I would like to remind you that Moscow and Beijing will respond to double containment by the United States with double counteraction. Foreign Ministry spokesman Maria Zakharova said when asked about a possible deployment of U.S. missiles in Japan. The Japan Times reported on September 7th that the United States had expressed an interest in deploying a Typhoon mid-range missile system to Japan for joint military exercises. Well, China is not buying it. So they're basically saying, look, if you attack one, you're going to have to deal with us both. And that is partly what the BRICS deal is going on. I overheard a conversation. One of the BRICS, I think it was the Indian prime minister or the ambassador, saying we continue to ask to be included in the G7, right? The seven club, right? They kept asking for permission to be part of the 7 club. They couldn't get in. So you know what they said? We made our own club. They made their own club, right? Now they don't have to be part of your club. They're their own club. And so this is kind of interesting how this is kind of falling out. And again, we're not on either side of these things. We don't really care. But it is interesting to watch it because we're looking at it from the lens of the 10,000-foot view as scriptures being fulfilled. We're seeing something hitting the Babylonian statue. Maybe it's a brick. Right? Maybe it's a brick hitting that statue, right? And in fact, the war of words is heating up. And so this is dangerous, guys. Vladimir Putin sends direct threat to the UK. If you're over the pond, and we have a few friends over there, we love you all over there. Be safe. Vladimir Putin sends direct threat to the UK over active war move against Russia. And so this conference that they're having where they're discussing releasing permission, essentially green lighting, sending long-range missiles into Russia, well, that's an act of world war. That's an act of serious conflict. And so, of course, Vladimir Putin has warned that the West letting Kiev use long-range weapons to strike Russian targets would mean NATO would be at war with Russia. And Sir Keir Starmer is traveling to Washington to meet U.S. President Joe Biden to discuss allowing Ukraine to use long-range Storm Shadow missiles following pleas from Kiev. The Russian president insisted his country would take appropriate decisions against any threats it faces. So how many know that we're seriously playing with some fire right here? How many can figure out that that's probably not a really great idea? Doing it anyway. This was always the plan. The scripture talks about the warmongers and their bloodthirst, and that's where it looks like we're marching toward those days of, as the scripture calls it, the day of slaughter. And so And it's not just any one particular country. So if you look around the earth, again, 10,000 foot view, right, guys? We see peace being taken from the earth in various places. Let's take a look at this. After El Mayo's arrest, Mexicans fear violence may engulf Sinaloa. And this was actually reported in July. And we're seeing now evidence that there's a conflict that's brewing in Sinaloa and throughout Mexico. So we've got other areas of the world that are rumbling at the same time. You also have internal conflicts in the United States. We're going to get there, guys. But before we do, you know, the BRICS nations are still dealing with their infrastructure issues also, but they're plowing ahead. And that is why they're plowing ahead, because they expect there to be problems with the West. BRICS challenges existing security concepts, and Europe's economy is in trouble. Putin meets with BRICS officials to talk new security architecture, and Europe seeks to jumpstart economy with interest rate cuts, which will actually be the demise, guys. The interest rate cuts will not work. So you're hearing announcements that they're probably going to make a cut. That's going to do damage to the dollar, bad damage. So they're in a situation they really can't get out of. And this is by the way, this is the whiplash of usury. This is the whiplash of usury. This is why it is against the Torah to do this. It ends up destroying the very system that uses it. So the real ultimate collapse occurs to the very system, the very banking system that violates the Torah and uses usury. It in of itself will collapse. And so it's inevitable. It's a mathematical certainty. Mathematical certainty. And in fact, the countries that have done the math, the intelligent, wise countries that are trying to endure, that want to survive this collapse, right? So pay attention again, 10,000 foot view, right? Follow at least pay attention to what these wealthy nations are doing. Okay, Saudi Arabia is accelerating the decline of the petrodollar by promoting the petro yuan. What? Yep. Saudi Arabia's industry and mineral resources minister said his country will try new things, including using the yuan in crude oil deals, as Riyadh seeks to incorporate China's products such as electrical vehicles, the C-19 passenger jet, renewable energy infrastructure. Oh, so they have a use case now for the Chinese dollar, right? So now the yuan has a use. It's now the petro yuan is not substantial to the ministry. We believe Saudi Arabia will do what's in its best interest, but I think Saudi Arabia will always try new things, and it's open to new ideas, right? So they're downplaying it a little bit, but here's the thing. If you can buy oil with the yuan, then the yuan has a new use case, a direct use case. It doesn't need to convert to another currency. It has its own valuation based upon its ability to convert to oil. Huge deal. Huge deal. That's what the hegemony floated on. If it was good for the hegemony, okay. And you're seeing also all kinds of connections. Remember, BRICS includes Brazil. So Chinese troops to join Brazil in military drills with U.S. forces. So Chinese troops will take part in the first time in Brazil's annual military exercise this week. That also include U.S. forces. So, by the way, it goes to show you a lot of what you're seeing is what? Theater. Okay? A lot of what you're seeing is theater. Remember who their ultimate enemy is and who the scripture says they ultimately fight. Okay? So, what we're really being distracted from is the real enemy among us that came in without us even so much as paying any attention. They warned us about it. They did movies like The Matrix and Terminator to let us know that this technology was coming in and that it would rule the world, if you will. And then when it showed up, people just embraced it like it was no big deal. Billionaire Larry Ellison says vast AI-fueled surveillance system. Listen to this, guys. Are you ready? Are you listening? to those people that want to live in these 15-minute cities, to all the folks that want to live in these confinement areas, okay? AI fuel surveillance systems can ensure citizens will be on their best behavior. A citizen, you should look up that word, what it means in Black's Law Dictionary. You might find that definition fascinating, especially those of you who are retaining your sovereignty. Larry Ellison says AI will enable a vast surveillance system that can monitor citizens. Well, making you subject to technology. Ellison, the billionaire co-founder of Oracle, shared his thoughts on AI during a recent meeting. And again, they leak these things on purpose because, again, we officially protest and we do not agree nor give consent to such a thing. But they are going to take it because nobody is objecting, right? We object, and if necessary, we will walk away. We will not live under your cameras and all that, right? We're not going to live in those types of situations. But a whole lot of people are saying, well, okay, all right, because they want to see what the superhuman breakthroughs are going to be. They want to stick around and see what the next chapter. They got their popcorn ready. They want to see what's coming next. Researchers have revealed that unlocking the brain's neurocode could be the key to creating superhuman AI. Because we definitely need that. We definitely, we should do everything so we could have a superhuman AI, right? I mean, isn't that like everybody's in agreement there? A group of researchers with the Taylor and Francis group says that building artificial intelligence that can surpass human capabilities is not only possible, but could also happen sooner than we ever expected. And of course, they keep making this sound like it is this really great thing that artificial intelligence, this beast system, is going to lead you. So just again, for those that are catching up slowly, maybe aren't good Bible students, the scripture in the book of Revelation talks about, believe it or not, I know you're going to find this is going to be up for those of you that are not readers. It talks about a beast in the last days who would speak and do great miracles. A soulless beast. Okay? Meanwhile, they're going to sell you need this surveillance. And why do you need this surveillance? Well, because haven't you heard? Crime rates are going up. We need to keep watch on everything. Oh my goodness, problem, reaction, solution. Okay? And so they let in all of these, right? These gangs and things like that. They let all this in. And of course, now they need a solution. Now, I don't really want to go through this story. I'm just showing this to you because this is how these things work. You essentially have a problem, reaction, solution, continuous process going on. And so because now you have this increased crime wave, places like Wyoming, Montana, they're having crime waves. Okay? Not to mention the cities, but they're talking about even rural places that you wouldn't expect it. They're having crime waves, right? So what's going to happen? The people are going to start to ask for solutions. And then when they're presenting solutions, which they, of course, just happen to have ready, it just so happens, coincidentally, we have some robots. Did anybody remember watching the movie AI Robot? Remember, or iRobot? Remember that movie? Little did we know that it might have been predictive programming. Okay? Robots are taking over New York City. And first they show you the industrial ones. See how they do this? Now, of course, once you read this, you're going to think you're thinking AI, right? Oh, you think, so first they're going to show you like the, moving equipment robots, like the super handy ones. Okay? The ones that do the jobs nobody wants to do. Technology, doing chemical technology or things like that. But the point was the headline. Okay, the point wasn't the story. The point was putting this in the conscious that robots are taking over. See that? That was a little subconscious hit. And these are things that I pick up. I start noticing these things. They're almost like blips. And you know how, like, you ever see those compilations where they show the newscasters and they're repeating the same line, and they're all these different newscasters and they're all repeating the same line, and then you realize, oh my goodness, they're on a script, right? Like, it finally hits you like, oh wow, this is scripted. Well, it's the same with headlines. It's the same thing with some of these headlines. There's a theme. They're usually trying to push a theme, and if you catch it, obviously you can get in front of it and at least understand, what you're dealing with. And again, in the meantime, what they want to do, and will they be successful? I don't know. There's a thing called the First Amendment. You know that? Is in the United States of America, there's a thing called the First Amendment. And the First Amendment protects your freedom of speech, doesn't give you freedom of speech, protects your freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is something you're born with, okay? And the amendment is meant to protect a freedom you already have. You don't get it from the government, okay? You don't get it from anywhere. You got it from Elohim. You have this freedom. It's meant to be protected, right? And it's, funny that the Second Amendment is, you can say, First Amendment is you can say whatever you want. The Second Amendment is, but you better get a gun. So you need to know your amendments, right? And so here's what's happening. They're slowly chipping away at this notion. So now, they got these former politicians and other high-level people coming out saying, we need to have a global agreement. Let's have a global agreement. And how would you enforce this global agreement? Oh my. I suppose we would need global speech enforcement officials. Oh, and you would enforce the speech mandates or standards of what? Great Britain over the people of what? Senegal? This is nonsense. It's just overreach. Fresh off the crackdown on so-called keyboard warriors over social media posts connected to the recent anti-mass immigration riots, leading leftist politicians in Britain are beginning to demand for new speech restrictions on the internet. This will implode. This is a nothing burger and it goes nowhere. Why? Because ultimately that is the entire point of the internet. And so the very citizenry that it's meant to control will revolt. Again, you cannot outrun your own people. Unless the people are coming from the ground up, such a concept, and bringing it from the top down, they won't submit, and it'll end up crumbling the very government that imposes it. So a lot of these things are short-lived ideas that do not have long-term written on them at all. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing a lot of attention now being drawn to institutions, and this is across the world, all over the earth. Institutions are suddenly coming under scrutiny like never before. Those institutions that are usually responsible for law enforcement, like this group, and it's basically now, if you haven't heard about it, there was another attempted assassination on Donald Trump. And again, we're never sure if these are publicity stunts or actual real assassination attempts. Nevertheless, a lot of attention is being drawn here. And I do think that there's an attempt to repair damage and draw attention away from previous faux pas, shall we say. So once again, we're seeing scrambling. Speaking of scrambling, did you know that the U.S. scrambled fighter jets to intercept Russia aircraft near Alaska this week? That happened. So there's that. The United States scrambled fighter jets after Russian military aircraft were detected near Alaska. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, said Wednesday that it detected, tracked, and intercepted 2 Russian military aircraft operating in the Alaska Air Defense Identification Zone. And so, again, you may say, oh, that's routine. That's no big deal. Happens all the time. Yeah, maybe it does. And maybe you're not real worried about it. But nevertheless, it is a very, very dangerous and foreboding thing, especially when you consider the perception of these nations. Now, You may not believe this, right? You may think, because if you live in the United States, and many of our audience does, much of our audience does, you see things from a certain perspective, right? So we have to step outside the United States to see how the world sees you. It's a very healthy thing to do. And historians who don't really have, necessarily are a finger on the scale, well, they just pointed out that 4 out of 5 major predictors for civil war in the United States have already happened. And so noted historians, demographers, and authors are warning that the United States is on the verge of another civil war. Neil Howe, co-author of the book The Fourth Turning, An American Prophecy, noted that 4 out of 5 predictors for a crisis have already happened, leaving the country on the verge of an unparalleled internal conflict, which I believe we are barreling toward with an election that is extremely divided. He said that the first of the 4 that have come to pass is a crisis over debt, which Howe referred to as a new Tea Party movement, which manifested during the 2010 political conflicts under the same name. The second is WMD, weapons of mass destruction, crisis, attack on an American major city, which of course we know about that. The third was a pandemic, which of course we know about that. The fourth was Russia invading a former Soviet republic. This was fulfilled when Russia began its special military operations in Ukraine. And so I'm not sure exactly how that all spells internal civil war. I do know that I was shown a civil war in 2013 and recorded what I saw. And it looks to me like we're being set up for the very thing that I was shown. So are we about to see that? I do believe that the United States has some very difficult days ahead. And speaking of some of that, one of the things that we knew was coming in the last days was pestilence. Okay, pestilence, which is not the same as a disease, but pestilence comes from the insect world, right? And scientists have issued PSA after discovering highly invasive New York species capable of spreading across the entire East Coast. We're talking about a big, big issue here. Even the smallest creatures can have a huge impact, as one species of ant is demonstrating in New York City. Since first being spotted in the Big Apple in 2011, this particular ant, which is native to Europe, has settled and thrived in New York City, picking up the name Manhattan. That's funny. A report published in the Biological Invasions Journal, as described by NPR, has detailed that the Manhattan is now challenging the common pavement and ant as the dominant ant species in the city. Troubling scientists have also predicted that they may yet spread further than New York City, potentially expanding their range toward Maine in the north and Georgia in the south. So why is this concerning? That's a good question. While it may not seem like an ant can make a massive impact on an ecosystem, okay, research is being conducted to see how likely, we're talking about a big issue here. Sorry, I went a little bit here. It's not like just a crazy ant running around Manhattan. Threaten native plants, insect species, and judging by the impacts the insects have had on other areas, they're supposed to be, scientists are concerned. So we're seeing the impact of a little thing, which you would think nothing of, right? That would come under the radar. Who moves like this? Who sends in gnats, ants, frogs, right? We got to be seeing that this is some interesting judgments that are manifesting in this hour, okay? And especially when you got, guys like this saying things like this. I'm just not even going to comment. Is it any wonder so many people are deceived? Is it any wonder? And they go out there every so often, and what do? They put another spell right on the same folks. Okay. Meanwhile, we got common sense has left the room. Look at this. An Arizona mom was arrested for questioning a local government in front of a 10-year-old daughter, and she has to sue now. She was literally handcuffed in front of her daughter for asking a question. Can you believe that? So I don't, you can find this story on Remnant Watch, but it's very interesting because we're finding ourselves fighting. You know, representative government is just that. It's meant to represent the people, not take on life of its own or become its own monster. And that usually is what happens. Bureaucracies tend to take on life of their own and exist for their own existence, if you will. And so consequently, people are generally enslaved at a certain generational point by multi-generational institutions. This is why they should have charters with an expiration. Charters with an expiration. Why? So that they would have to basically reapply and establish their value in a new generation versus just being there, because that kind of institutional power tends to be corrupted. Okay. One of the things that we keep hearing about, by the way, guys, as I talk about distractions, is these UFO things. Anybody else noticing that there's a massive uptick in coverage of UFOs, and they really want us thinking about it like that? Bombshell UFO hearings to take place in Congress as new footage emerges of huge craft near U.S. nuclear weapons base. Dun, dun, dun. This is just out. Another round of public UFO hearings are in store for Congress within mere weeks, according to a senior member of the Senate's Armed Services Committee. The new Senate hearing, which would arrive as early as September, follows another bizarre summer of U.S. military whistleblower claims about these baffling airborne mysteries, including ex-Pentagon officials Luis Elizondo's revelation that he personally handled an alien implant removed from a veteran service member. New York Democrat Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, who confirmed the hearing, said, "It is a priority for me because I think it's very important we continue to make these things publicly available." So all of a sudden, what was never talked about is now being discussed openly. This is important because it's on the list of things that we knew would happen before the coming of the king. And so now there's a lot more discussion. It has now gone mainstream. I think when it's on the floor of the Senate or Congress, I think you can safely say that's kind of gone mainstream at this point. Like we're done pretending. We're done with the fake, oh, what are you talking about? And I didn't see anything. We're done with that now. So we're now moved on to, it's now an accepted reality that there are things flying or things in the air that you cannot identify. Very good. Glad we finally agreed. It took us only, let's see, 1947 to now. We've been being gaslighted for 70 something years. Gaslighted, like, oh no, there's nothing there. What are you talking about? People are taking pictures and stuff and going, what do you mean? There's entire channels of nothing but extraordinary sights, and they'll just, oh no, you're nuts. So it's about time at least that people are starting to realize that, which is great. And so that's good to hear anyway. But nevertheless, it is portending the coming of the king. And so that's why I pointed out, because it does check a box, if you will. And by the way, another thing that we needed to watch is this continued seem to effort. And this is, again, I'm not sure if it's distraction or if it is a genuine, I don't know. I don't even know what to make of this. But obviously, this is the second time there's been a assassination attempt on candidate Trump. This one was at the Florida Golf Club. And of course, he was safe. He immediately reached out, told everyone he was fine. So this may serve to vaunt him to, meteoric levels of popularity, which may serve someone's plan. Right? I think they have a plan for that. And part of that plan, I continue to suspect, is to bring the world to the brink of like despair, the edge of annihilation. So when I see this kind of a headline, right here, that's what I think of. Medvedev allows use of nuclear weapons by Russia when patience runs out. The politician underscored that no one really needs a nuclear conflict. It's a very bad story with very difficult outcome. And Russia does not use nuclear weapons in response to enemy attacks because it understands the danger and irreversibility of such a conflict. For now, Moscow is showing patience, but it may run out. Deputy head of the Russian Security Defense Council, Dmitry Medvedev, warned in his Telegram channel. What do Western leaders in the political establishment, which have gotten carried away with the war, think about our country's reaction to probable missile strikes deep in the territory? Well, here's what they think. The Russians talk a lot about responding with weapons of mass destruction, but do nothing. These are just verbal interventions. The Russians will not cross the line. They're just scaring. They don't need a nuclear conflict. They can lose more, including the support of the global South. Anyway, who needs the apocalypse? Well, and so on. In the same way, Medvedev wrote. The politician underscored that no one really needs a nuclear conflict. It's a very bad story. But he goes on to say that Russia is not afraid of the conflict. They're just not stupid. In other words, they know that once they cross that line, it's kind of all bets are off, right? And also, remember what I talked about several times. Ukraine is to the west of Russia. And with the winds blowing from the west, think California, to the east, think New York, that's the way the weather moves, right? Generally across the earth. It moves west to east. Well, what's going to happen with all that fallout? It's going to go right into Russia. So, I think they're wise to have restraint. I think that makes some sense to see if they can resolve this conflict without having to resort to those types of weapons. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean they don't have them and that they may not use them. And what we're seeing now is more ominous headlines and more kind of direct threats. The threats seem to have escalated a little bit. Even the word escalation, look at this. Americans can't hide from nuclear war, Moscow warns as West mulls escalation. So they're all blaming each other for the escalation, okay? And the Kremlin has issued yet more warnings following reports that Biden administration could soon greenlight long-range attacks by Kiev forces on Russian territory using U.S.-supplied arms. Both the UK and Canada are on board. Of course they are. Look at these guys. We're on board. We reported earlier, British Prime Minister Ken Starmer is visiting Washington, where he's directly lobbying Biden to jump on board and grant Zelensky urgent requests to lift all restrictions on Western weaponry. Let's declare war. Come on. Let's do it. Let's urgently do it. Do you all see an urgent, compelling reason for this? What are they hiding? What are they afraid of? Those are the questions that keep coming to my mind. What are you all so frantic about? Okay. You know full well what the consequences of that move is going to be. He flat tells you, they're all telling you that that's essentially a declaration of war from NATO. And they are saying, let's go, let's go. These people represent you? Do they represent the common American? Or are these like the El Salvadorans, those 60,000 that need to be locked up and the rest of us can live in peace, right? Come on, somebody, right? They locked up all the bad guys and everybody else has now become the quietest, nicest part of the world. And they're being ruled by a bunch of criminals, right? Okay, well, and even the earth is tired of it. I told you guys. I told you the earth will keep responding. Okay, this was on the 15th. Officials report a 6.5 magnitude earthquake off British Columbia coast. This is the west coast of North America and British Columbia coast. And so, the magnitude earthquake struck off the British Columbia coast. And, folks, what we need to realize is that the earth is just going to keep responding. It's not going to stop. We saw a bunch of here. This is the other story I was looking for. The one in California. Earthquake near Malibu. Shakes LA County, coast and inland areas. And by the way, that was moving. The earth is moving in certain parts of California like 10 inches a week. Can you imagine that? 10 inches a week? Wow, that's a lot of movement. Okay. An earthquake centered in the Malibu area, producing shaking Thursday morning in widespread areas of Southern California from the coast to inland communities. Matthew 24 predicts, Mashiach predicts that we would see earthquakes in diverse places. The quake's initial magnitude of 5.1 was soon downgraded to 4.7. Of course, they do this to try to keep people from leaving. It was followed by more than 24 aftershocks, including 2 of magnitude 3.4, with more aftershocks possible in the hours and days ahead. And so Southern California is really starting to get shook. And nobody's really shocked. I'm just saying. Okay? So Southern California is looking like it is becoming more and more difficult to abide there. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we're not suggesting any one particular area is better than another, because you have to find where he commands for you to be. I do believe that many of the people do not realize that they're abiding on soiled land and contamination. And so this is something that is very serious going on, and a little bit of a humanitarian story, and something that we should keep in our hearts for those that are in our hemisphere. And these are people, and the Cubans are definitely suffering. This is the result of socialism and the result of communism. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. When you have a captured labor force, you should have been the demonstration of all those principles. You should have been a phenomenal example that all the world could look at and say, oh, well, clearly that model really works, right? And instead, here's what we see. We see a very different reality emerging from Cuba, okay? And Cuba is slashing size of daily bread rations as ingredients run thin. Cuba's communist-run government on Monday. So this was a massive experiment that was run in the Caribbean. And we've watched this. Those of us that are my generation have watched the horrible tragedy that is Cuba. Cuba's communist-run government on Monday slashed a quarter of its weight of a subsidized ration of daily bread, the latest shortage that strained the decades-old subsidy scheme created by the late Fidel Castro. The bread, one of the handful of still subsidized basic food products in Cuba, will be reduced. And so essentially, still many Cubans who basically live on about $15 a month can scarcely afford to shop for more expensive bread on the private market, leaving them with few alternatives. So this was the result of everyone getting on the same program. This was what communism brought. And so don't anybody fall victim to the lie that communism works. It does not. It always results in the same result consistently throughout the earth. And they always blame capitalist neighbors. They always blame the capitalists, like, oh, no, it was those guys. And if it weren't for you. But when you remove incentivization, when you remove private ownership, which the scripture encourages, so I don't know where people got that. When you remove those things, you remove a lot of the incentive to excel, to do well. You also cripple your own innovation. You'll notice that Cuba never went on, from the time that they declared themselves a communist country, never went on to win a Nobel Peace Prize for any scientific endeavor, never led the world in any technological advance, did not share with the world any new innovative farming or crop yielding techniques, did not come up with any amazing new city building or a lifestyle improvement. Because you see, without the incentive of value, without the incentive of improvement, which is what the barakah or blessing is, without that incentive, then you end up killing the spirit. It's kind of like the zoo animals. You ever see the zoo animals, and it's kind of like you look in their eyes and you go, wow, that wild life is gone. They've been in a cage too long, and now They just show up like a zoo animal for their portion of food, and they've lost their ability to eat, to hunt, to acquire, to live really authentically in whatever land that they're in. And that's what communized systems do. These are criminal, and they're an assault to the human, the ruach of a human being, the individuality. And so when we see these things, it is a sad but real thing that I do believe we have. Unfortunately, we continue to see them, and I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. I think we're going to continue to see scenes of starvation, difficulty, heartache. Unfortunately, we're set for that. And one last story I want to make a mention of, and please keep in prayer those in California. So besides the things that we're seeing with the ground shaking, you're also seeing wildfires in Southern California torch dozens of homes and force thousands to evacuate. Okay, and so 3 major wildfires in Southern California's mountains east of LA torched dozens of homes and forced thousands of people to evacuate, officials said Wednesday. So fire is unsettling or discomforting more people. This will continue as a trend, as I believe Elohim is going to continue to discomfort his people. He, after all, has plans for some of you who are chosen and elect to bring you together to work together. And that is so you can prosper one another, not so that you can be communists. Okay? Don't get that confused. That's so you can work together to encourage one another. You can seek the benefit of your brethren. You're being ruled by people who figured that out, by the way. You're being ruled as nations. I'm not necessarily talking about you guys that are watching, but the world is being ruled by people who figured out that if they work together, they'd all do better. They'd all become wealthier than by themselves. And so they did a long time ago, because evil conspired for its own survival. I'll say it again. Evil has to conspire for its own survival, because the good people, the common folk, if they ever figure it out, would wipe it out. So this has been the way in which we've lost ground. And as is in the scripture, it says many times the children of the world are wiser than the children of the kingdom. And so don't let it be so among you, but instead find ways to collaborate, find ways to work together, find ways to build wealth together, to overcome together, to unite together. After all, that is where we're headed. We're headed to a place called together. Well, that's it for tonight. I pray this update has been a barakah to you, a blessing to you wherever you are. It's always our honor and privilege to come and do these with you. And we're so thankful again for all the partners and friends of Remnant House that make these broadcasts possible. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.